The cryopod seal hissed open at 3:47 ship time, and David's consciousness crawled back from the edge of nothing. His neural implant fed him vitals, heart rate climbing, oxygen saturation normalizing, muscle atrophy within acceptable parameters. 73 years had passed outside his frozen casket. Inside, he'd aged perhaps 6 months at the cellular level. He was alone in the hibernation bay, surrounded by 200 dormant pods stretching into the darkness. The Meridian's backup lights cast everything in amber. Something was wrong. The wake sequence wasn't supposed to trigger for another 18 months, not until they reached the Kepler 442 system. David pulled himself upright, fighting the familiar vertigo of revival. His fingers fumbled with the console, calling up the ship's status. What he saw made his blood freeze colder than any cryosleep. Hull integrity 47%, life support critical, navigation offline. They'd hit something. Micrometeorite swarm, maybe, or debris from some long-dead civilization's orbital infrastructure. The Meridian was dying, and he was the only person awake to witness it. Then his door opened. She didn't knock, didn't announce herself over the comm. The bulkhead simply slid aside, and Elsa stood there in the corridor's dim light, wearing nothing but her thermal underlayer, the thin, sensor-embedded garment they all wore beneath their cryosuits. Her dark hair floated in the reduced gravity, and her eyes held an intensity that made David's chest tighten. Elsa, what? She peeled the underlayer over her head in one smooth motion, her movements economical and deliberate. Beneath, she wore a compression suit, the kind designed for emergency EVA operations. It was rated for hard vacuum, covered in patches from dozens of repairs, and looked like it had survived at least 3 previous colony missions. "Move over," she said, pushing past him toward the console. David pressed himself against the bulkhead, his mind still sluggish from revival drugs. "How long have you been awake?" 14 hours. Her fingers flew across the haptic interface, pulling up schematics he didn't have clearance to access. The impact triggered my pod's emergency protocols. Mission specialist override. I've been trying to stabilize the ship, but I need another pair of hands. The others? Can't wake them, not yet. Life support can barely handle 2 of us, and we need every joule of power for the repair drones. She glanced at him, and for the first time he saw the exhaustion carved into her face. "I'm sorry I woke you, but I ran the probability matrices. Alone, I had a 12% chance of saving the ship. With you, we're up to 34%. David pushed off the bulkhead, his training overriding his confusion. He was the structural engineer, second-tier colony preparation. Elsa was astrophysics and long-range scanning. Together, they might actually pull this off. "What do you need?" "Put this on." She tossed him a compression suit from her pack. "We're going outside." The Meridian's hull looked like it had been through a war. Hundreds of impact craters peppered the forward sections, and the main sensor array hung in twisted fragments. But the real problem was the fuel containment vessel. A puncture the size of David's fist had opened near the magnetic coupling, venting their precious deuterium into space at a rate that would leave them dead in the water within 72 hours. They floated in the darkness, tethered to the dying ship, while Earth's distant sun offered no more light than any other star. "I need you to hold the patch in place," Elsa said through the comm. "I'll activate the molecular bonding agent. We'll have exactly 90 seconds to get it sealed before the next venting cycle." "That's not enough time." "It's the time we have." David positioned himself against the hull, magnetic boots locked, and pressed the composite patch over the rupture. Through his gloves, he could feel the ship vibrating, the death rattle of failing systems. Elsa's hands moved with surgical precision, applying the bonding agent around the patch's perimeter. 50 seconds. 40. The patch began to warm as the molecular bonds activated, fusing with the hull's metallic substrate. 20 seconds. "It's not holding," David said. The pressure differential is 2. I know. Elsa pressed herself against the patch, adding her body weight to his. They hung there together in the void, two humans willing a broken ship to survive through nothing but determination and chemistry. 10 seconds. The venting cycle hit, and David felt the patch buckle beneath them. For one terrible moment, he was certain they'd failed. Then the bonds locked, the pressure equalized, and the ship stopped bleeding fuel into space. They didn't celebrate, couldn't afford to. There were 17 more critical repairs to make before they could even think about waking the others. They worked for 36 hours straight, moving from crisis to crisis, making impossible decisions about what systems to prioritize and what to sacrifice. When the last repair drone finally signaled completion, they collapsed together in the observation deck, too exhausted to return to their quarters. Elsa floated beside him, her compression suit still covered in carbon scoring and frozen coolant. "We did it," she said, and her voice carried a note of wonder, as if she couldn't quite believe it herself. "You did it," David corrected. "You held this ship together alone for 14 hours. "No." She turned to look at him, and in her eyes he saw something shift, a wall coming down, a distance closing. "I was holding it together. You made it whole again." Outside the viewport, Kepler 442 blazed in the distance, still 18 months away but close enough now to feel real. Somewhere down there waited a new world, a second chance for humanity. But in that moment, exhausted and alive in ways they'd never been in cryosleep, the only world that mattered was the tiny bubble of warmth and light they'd created together. The ship would heal, they would wake the others, the colony would survive. But first they would rest.